Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The Empire did not arrive quietly. It announced itself by bending starlight. At first, astronomers thought it was a lensing anomaly, a ripple in space beyond Pluto, where the sun's warmth fades into a thin suggestion. But the distortion did not behave like gravity. It unfolded. Something vast peeled itself into existence, as if reality were a curtain and an unseen hand had drawn it back. Then the ships came through. They were not ships in the way humans built ships. They had no visible engines, no glowing exhaust, no rotating habitats. They resembled slabs of polished obsidian, each one longer than the distance between Earth and its moon. Their surfaces reflected the sun with unnatural clarity, turning them into moving mirrors that cut black geometry across the sky. Within minutes, observatories across the planet confirmed the count. Nine vessels the size of small worlds. Panic traveled faster than light ever could. Through social feeds, news alerts, frantic calls between defense departments. Financial markets collapsed in under 40 seconds. Air traffic froze mid-route. Submarines dove deeper. In Houston, mission control screens flickered as satellites recalibrated to capture clearer images. In Beijing, radio arrays pivoted as one. In Nairobi, amateur astronomers live-streamed their shaking telescopes to millions. No one needed translation when the message arrived. It did not ride radio waves. It appeared. Every powered screen on Earth, phones, billboards, cockpit displays, hospital monitors, blinked to black. White symbols formed. Not letters. Not exactly. They shifted, rearranged, resolved into language the mind understood, without learning. A pressure settled behind the eyes of every human being watching. Then the message clarified itself. You are observed. You are inferior. Prepare for subjugation. Oceans responded before governments did. Tides shuddered as gravitational fields adjusted to the presence of impossible mass. Migratory birds veered mid-flight. Dogs began howling in cities that had never known silence until that moment. In Washington, emergency protocols activated that had not been tested since the Cold War. In Moscow, keys were turned beneath layers of concrete. In New Delhi, parliament members shouted over one another, while aides tried to confirm the signal's origin. In Geneva, beneath reinforced steel and neutral flags, the United Nations Security Council convened in a chamber designed for nuclear brinkmanship, not cosmic empires. Dr. Amara Vance, chief xenolinguist, stared at the projection of the message suspended over the circular table. "It's not a translation," she murmured. "What do you mean it's not a translation?" asked the French delegate. "It's conceptual encoding. It's rewriting itself in each observer's cognitive framework. We're not reading their language." She swallowed. "We're reading our understanding of it." A silence followed that was thicker than fear. Around the world, militaries prepared retaliation plans they knew would fail. Analysts calculated energy outputs from the alien vessels. The numbers were discouraging. Each ship radiated power equivalent to a small star's sustained output. And yet, something was wrong. Dr. Vance leaned closer to the display. "Play it again." The message replayed. Not the words. The cadence. The structure. She frowned. "That's formal." "Formal?" the American ambassador snapped. "They just threaten planetary enslavement." "Yes," Amara said slowly. "But listen to it. The symmetry. The declarative hierarchy. It's ritualized." In Tokyo, Professor Kenji Rao of comparative anthropology was having the same thought. "They're performing dominance," he said into a live feed watched by millions. "This isn't efficient communication. It's ceremonial." The Empire's ships shifted position. Perfectly. 9 vessels moved into a geometric configuration, so precise it could have been drawn with a compass across the sky. Each angle identical, each vector exact. Humans watched from rooftops and beaches and city streets. A teenager in Sao Paulo zoomed in on the formation and muttered, "They're lining up like a parade." In Berlin, a mathematician began sketching the angles on her kitchen table. "They're using base 12 rotational symmetry," she whispered. "Why would you do that in combat?" The second transmission did not come immediately. The Empire waited, on purpose, as if allowing terror to ferment. Stock markets had already crashed. Prayer circles formed in public squares. Survivalist forums exploded with activity. Fighter jets were scrambled and immediately rendered irrelevant by scale alone. But amid the dread, something else emerged. Observation. Humans were very good at watching. The Empire's vessels emitted measurable gravitational harmonics. Their energy signatures pulsed at consistent intervals. Their formation implied central command with rigid subordination. Rigid, that word began appearing in encrypted chats between analysts. Rigid command structure. Rigid communication patterns. Rigid formation geometry. "They've done this before," said Admiral Ortega in Madrid, studying the feeds. "They're following a script." "How many civilizations do you think they've conquered?" asked her aide. "Enough to get bored." In Geneva, Amara replayed the message a 10th time. The phrase "you are inferior" resonated with unmistakable certainty. No embellishment, no flourish, just statement, like a species that had never been contradicted. And suddenly, she laughed. It slipped out before she could stop it. A short, startled sound. Every head turned. "Doctor?" someone asked carefully. "I'm sorry," she said, covering her mouth. But the laugh returned, stronger now. "They sound like a villain in a children's cartoon." The room stared. "They announce their superiority," she continued between breaths. "They declare subjugation before taking it. They arrange themselves symmetrically for dramatic effect." "That's not funny," said the British delegate. "No," Amara agreed, eyes bright. "It's predictable." Across the world, similar realizations sparked. Memes appeared within 20 minutes. Images of the 9 ships were captioned. "Behold, we have arrived." "Sir, this is a Wendy's." "Do you have an appointment?" The first wave of panic collided with the second wave of human coping. Humor. Late-night hosts went live despite network shutdowns. Comedians broadcast from basements. A popular streamer overlaid googly eyes onto the lead ship and titled the feed, "When you try to conquer Earth but forget we're weird." The view count climbed into the hundreds of millions. In a bunker beneath Colorado, a data analyst wiped tears of laughter from his face while running combat simulations. "They gave us time," he said. "Who gives their enemy time?" On screens across the planet, the Empire's ships held their immaculate formation, waiting for screams, waiting for surrender. Instead, they received a planetary transmission assembled collaboratively in under 6 minutes. It piggybacked on every satellite, submarine cable, and deep space antenna humanity possessed. The message was simple. No threats, no bravado, just text. "Is this a joke?" For the first time since entering the solar system, one of the 9 vessels flickered, its surface shimmering as if recalibrating. Deep within the alien flagship, processes accelerated. Humans had responded, not with submission, not with counterforce, but with something the Empire had not cataloged in 10 million years of conquest: mockery. And across Earth, as the alien armada hung like obsidian gods above a fragile blue world, humanity began to laugh. The Empire did not appreciate being laughed at. For 0.004 seconds, a span so brief no human instrument could measure it, the 9 vessels remained motionless after receiving Earth's reply. Inside the flagship, decision engines older than multicellular life recalculated. Mockery was not in the archive. Defiance, yes. Desperation, frequently. Primitive bravado, routinely. But humor directed upward, toward overwhelming power, had no precedent. So the Empire escalated. The second transmission did not arrive on screens. It arrived in orbit. Beyond Neptune, one of the system's distant moons, small, frozen, largely ignored by humanity, began to glow. Astronomers detected a spike in exotic radiation. Gravitational monitors screamed warnings. Across the solar system, telescopes locked onto the anomaly just in time to witness something impossible. Space folded. The moon compressed without exploding. It did not shatter or scatter debris. It collapsed inward as if reality itself had tightened a fist around it. Within 3 seconds, It was no longer a moon. It was a sphere of molten light the size of a city. Then even that was gone, reduced to a dense, luminous bead orbiting nothing. Silence followed. Not literal silence. The world was too loud for that. But the kind of silence that spreads through a species when it realizes power has just been demonstrated with surgical precision. The third message came immediately. We have erased civilizations older than your star. We will erase you with equal efficiency. Subjugation is mercy. Financial markets, which had only just begun to stabilize under nervous optimism, disintegrated completely. Military commanders stopped pretending conventional retaliation mattered. The demonstration had not been reckless. It had been measured. The Empire had destroyed something distant enough to avoid immediate human casualties, but close enough to prove they could do far worse. In underground command centers, the mood shifted. Less laughter, more calculation. Dr. Amara Van stood in Geneva watching orbital projections update in real time. The singularity left behind by the collapsed moon now emitted controlled energy pulses. They're showing us they can rewrite matter, someone whispered. No, Amara replied softly. They're showing us they think this is persuasive. In Madrid, Admiral Ortega studied the fleet's formation again. They haven't moved, she said. Not even after that display. Why would they? Her aide asked. Because if you're about to conquer a planet, Ortega said, you don't stay in parade formation. Around the world, analysts reached the same conclusion. The Empire had power beyond comprehension, but it also had doctrine. The gravitational harmonics of their ships remained perfectly synchronized. Their communication cadence followed identical structural symmetry to the first message. Even their threat escalation followed a ritual arc: declaration, demonstration, inevitability. A cultural historian in Lagos leaned toward her microphone during a global emergency symposium. This is theater, she said. This is how you intimidate a predictable opponent. Are we predictable? The host asked. She smiled faintly. No. On social media, despite rolling blackouts and emergency bandwidth restrictions, the memes returned. Footage of the moon's collapse circulated with captions. Bro deleted a side quest. When you're flexing, but it's not even the main character. The laughter was thinner now, but it was still there. In Houston, a young astrophysicist named Elena Marquez stared at simulation models running across 6 screens. The Empire's energy output dwarfed anything humanity could counter directly, but their communication grid. She leaned closer. Why are they broadcasting from fixed nodes? She muttered. Her colleague looked over. Because they can? No, Elena said slowly. Because they always do. The quantum-locked nodes relaying the Empire's transmissions were spaced at precise stellar intervals, mathematically elegant, evenly distributed, efficient, predictable. If they've conquered for millions of years, she said, their systems are optimized for compliance, not resistance. Her colleague blinked. That's a distinction without comfort. Elena's lips twitched. It might be the only comfort we get. In Beijing, cryptographers dissected the phrasing of subjugation is mercy. It's axiomatic, one observed. They're not arguing. They're stating doctrine. Meaning, they don't negotiate. They administer. Back in Geneva, the Security Council debated response options ranging from symbolic retaliation to strategic surrender. Amara listened, fingers steepled beneath her chin. They want fear, she said finally. They deserve fear, snapped one delegate. Did you see what they did? Yes, Amara said, and they chose something distant. Dramatic, controlled. They're curating our reaction. You're suggesting we don't react? I'm suggesting, she replied carefully, that we react wrong. The room quieted. On screens worldwide, humanity composed its next reply, not through a single authority, but through a chaotic flood of commentary, satire, academic panels, live streams, and public debates. The official transmission, however, came from no identifiable government. It simply appeared on every channel, piggybacking on the same infrastructure the Empire had used. You erased the moon. A pause. Then the second line. That's adorable. In homes, bunkers, submarines, and orbital stations, people held their breath. Some winced, some grinned. Above Earth, the 9 ships remained in flawless symmetry. But deep within the flagship, something shifted. The Empire had expected despair. They had expected fracture resistance. They had expected pleas for survival. Instead, the inferior species had responded to annihilating force with diminishment. Adorable, the word translated imperfectly through imperial cognition matrices. It implied smallness, performative excess, an attempt to impress. For the first time in recorded conquest history, the Empire's predictive models encountered divergence. Human morale indicators were not collapsing. They were fluctuating, spiking in strange intervals. Laughter correlated with threat escalation. Mockery correlated with unity across geopolitical boundaries. The data did not resolve cleanly. Inside the flagship, a question propagated through ancient processors. Why does intimidation increase their cohesion? On Earth, Elena Marquez watched the fleet's energy signatures flicker almost imperceptibly. She leaned back in her chair. Did we just annoy them? Across the globe, someone clipped that sentence and turned it into a trending tag. #Annoy the Empire. The Empire prepared its next move. Humanity prepared its punchlines. And between overwhelming power and reckless absurdity, the gap began to narrow, not in strength, but in understanding. The Empire believed inevitability was the end of every story. Humanity had never liked predictable endings. The Empire initiated invasion protocols at precisely 3 hours and 17 minutes coordinated universal time. Not 3:16, not 3:18. Precision was doctrine. From their perfect 9-fold formation, the vessels shifted into descending vectors toward Earth's orbital plane. The motion was mathematically elegant, each ship rotating along an axis that preserved symmetry even in advance. Energy accumulated along their hulls in luminous seams, bright enough to be seen from Earth's night side. Across human defense networks, alarms cascaded, trajectory confirmed, impact windows calculated. They're establishing firing solutions. In Colorado, London, Delhi, Canberra, command centers braced for planetary bombardment. But when the first strike came, it was not directed at a capital city. It targeted an object in low Earth orbit, an aging communications satellite long scheduled for decommission. A beam of coherent gravity lanced outward from one of the Empire's ships. The satellite did not explode. It unwrote. Panels peeled into particulate light. Circuits separated into atomic dust. Within a second, it was gone. A demonstration again. Precise, surgical, contained. The Empire was signaling escalation without chaos. Human analysts stared at the data feeds. They're pruning, Admiral Ortega said, removing infrastructure in ascending strategic value. They'll cripple us methodically, her aide replied. Yes, she said, methodically. That word again. Method, doctrine, sequence. Across Earth, governments prepared coordinated countermeasures. And then humanity did what it had always done when faced with overwhelming structure. It fractured, not into surrender, into improvisation. No single order triggered it. No global directive announced it. It simply began. In Sao Paulo, an aerospace engineering collective launched a swarm of tiny reflective drones originally designed for art installations. Thousands of mirrored shards spread into orbit, forming a chaotic glittering cloud that refracted incoming targeting scans into useless glare. In Mumbai, software students cracked open abandoned satellite firmware and rewrote identification protocols so that civilian weather satellites began broadcasting military signatures, and military hardware started reporting as pizza delivery services. In Lagos, radio hobbyists flooded open imperial communication bands with recursive mathematical jokes, paradoxes that looped endlessly in translation matrices. In Seoul, a VR studio hijacked a public broadcast feed and inserted a dancing looped animation of a neon-colored cat directly into a carrier wave pointed at the lead imperial vessel. The Empire's sensors absorbed it all and tried to categorize it. Inside the flagship, strategic processors recalculated threat matrices in real time. Expected resistance, centralized, defensive, hierarchical. Observed resistance. Distributed, contradictory, nonsensical. A second beam fired from the Empire's flank, targeting what their analysis identified as a primary human command hub in Nevada. The structure was obliterated in a pulse of gravitational distortion. Dust settled over a flattened warehouse. News drones arrived within minutes. The building's contents, revealed in high-definition livestream, had consisted entirely of industrial shelving units filled with rubber ducks. Millions of identical yellow ducks. The livestream chat scrolled so fast it became a blur. In Geneva, Dr. Amara Van stared at the footage, then pressed her palm against her mouth as laughter escaped despite herself. "They fired on a decoy," someone said. "No," she replied between breaths. "They fired on absurdity." The Empire updated its targeting algorithms. Human command centers were no longer static. Power signatures across major cities began fluctuating deliberately. Entire districts powered down at random intervals, while suburban neighborhoods lit up like false capitals. Military convoys split, merged, disguised themselves as civilian traffic, then reappeared where least expected. An art collective in Berlin projected massive geometric shapes on a cloud cover, shapes that mimicked the Empire's own symmetrical formations, but deliberately distorted. Angles were off by fractions. Lines wavered. Imperial pattern recognition systems flagged the projections as potential strategic signaling. They were graffiti. On social media, a new wave surged, clips of Imperial beams edited with comedic sound effects. The singularity bead beyond Neptune Photoshop with googly eyes. Tutorials titled, "How to Confuse a Galactic Overlord in 5 Easy Steps." Elena Marquez sat hunched over simulation screens in Houston, monitoring the Empire's adaptive cycles. "They're fast," her colleague muttered. "Yes," Elena said, "but they're optimizing for consistency." "Isn't that good?" "Not against us." She pulled up a comparative model of human response clusters. No central coordination. No unified doctrine. Millions of micro-decisions. "You can't predict noise," she said quietly. "Not when the noise thinks it's funny." In orbit, the reflective drone cloud drifted unpredictably, scattering Imperial scans into fractal nonsense. Civilian rocket hobbyists launched additional debris, not weapons, just clutter. The near-Earth environment became a shimmering, chaotic halo. The Empire's firing solutions began missing by meters, then by kilometers, not because their weapons lacked power, because their models required stable hostility markers. Humans kept moving the markers. In Tokyo, a robotics team reprogrammed delivery drones to fly synchronized patterns that mimicked missile swarms, only to disperse into harmless spirals at the last second. In Toronto, coders fed Imperial communication channels endless variations of the same question. "Are you sure?" Each iteration phrased differently, each syntactically valid, each semantically destabilizing. Inside the flagship, ancient processors began allocating unprecedented resources to anomaly resolution. Why did escalation increase human broadcast output? Why did destruction correlate with humor spikes? Why did targets dissolve into irrelevance? For 10 million years, conquest had followed a reliable arc: arrival, demonstration, submission. Here the arc bent. The Empire escalated again. This time, 3 vessels descended deeper into Earth's magnetosphere, energy building along their hulls for a coordinated strike meant to disable continental power grids. Global blackout. Civilizational paralysis. As their weapons charged, something unexpected occurred. Every major human city, New York, Shanghai, Cairo, London, Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, powered down voluntarily. Lights winked out across hemispheres. From orbit, Earth went dark. The Empire fired. Their beams lanced into electrical void. Nothing collapsed. Nothing shorted. Nothing cascaded. Seconds later, across the darkened continents, lights flared back on, not uniformly, but in coordinated bursts forming enormous glowing letters visible from space. Across North America, try harder. Across Europe, is that all? Across Asia, we're still here. The phrases were uneven, imperfect, some letters crooked where grids misaligned. But the message was unmistakable. In the flagship, Imperial processors stall for 0.012 seconds. An eternity. Strategic models fractured into competing projections. If intimidation fails, if destruction unifies, if unpredictability increases under pressure, then inevitability is not inevitable. Admiral Ortega watched the lights blaze back to life from a secure bunker in Madrid. "They can't model us," her aide whispered. Ortega allowed herself a thin smile. "Neither can we." In Houston, Elena leaned back, exhausted and exhilarated. "They keep trying to impose order," she said, "and we keep responding with chaos." Above Earth, the Empire's ships hovered, still impossibly vast, still overwhelmingly powerful, but no longer certain. For the first time in their conquest history, they faced a species that did not resist with symmetry. It resisted with improvisation. And the Empire had no doctrine for that. For the first time since entering the solar system, the Empire stopped advancing. The 9 vessels held position in high orbit, their gravitational fields humming softly against Earth's magnetosphere. Energy readings stabilized. No weapons charged. No beams formed. Across the planet, analysts noticed the same anomaly. They're thinking. Elena Marquez said, eyes fixed on her screen. Inside the Imperial flagship. Thinking was not hesitation. It was recalibration. For 10 million years, conquest had followed predicted stability curves. Fear reduced resistance. Demonstrations accelerated surrender. Escalation ensured compliance. But Earth's resistance metrics were not decaying. They were amplifying. Every show of force generated increased global synchronization, not through authority, but through shared absurdity. Mockery spiked cooperation. Humor flattened political divides. Improvisation multiplied faster than suppression algorithms could compensate. The Empire's models ran trillions of simulations. In 82% projections, full planetary sterilization succeeded. In 82% of those, adjacent civilizations observing the event exhibited anomalous cultural shifts, reduced intimidation compliance rates by up to 17%. In 64% of extended models, prolonged exposure to human behavioral unpredictability destabilized imperial doctrine itself. The conclusion propagated through command strata, like a fracture through crystal. Humans were not merely resisting. They were contagious. On Earth, the silence stretched into its 6th hour. No new strikes. No new threats. Social feeds, once frantic, shifted into speculation. Late-night hosts returned to air with cautious jokes. Emergency crews remained mobilized, but the global heartbeat slowed from sprint to watchful pacing. Then the Empire transmitted. The message did not override every screen this time. It appeared only on official channels, governments, research institutions, major communication hubs. The text formed slowly, not declarative, not symmetrical. Why do you respond with mirth? In Geneva, Dr. Amara Vance stared at the question. Her expression changed, not to laughter, but to something softer. "They're asking," she whispered. Security councils debated crafting a measured diplomatic response. Military advisors argued for strategic ambiguity. Public networks, however, were already alive with suggestions. Memes, essays, think pieces, stand-up monologues, philosophical threads. Humanity did not agree on much, but it agreed on this. The answer mattered. Within 40 minutes, a response compiled itself, not from a single government, but from thousands of overlapping inputs refined into a unified transmission. It went out on every channel the Empire could detect. Because you think this is about domination. The Empire process. You arrive in perfect lines. You announce your superiority. You expect terror. You expect us to calculate survival and submit. Across Earth, billions watch the exchange in real time. The message continued. But we didn't survive as a species by being predictable. Images accompanied the words, not weapons. History, early rockets exploding on launch pads while engineers cheered and took notes. Bridges collapsing and being rebuilt stronger. Cities arguing, protesting, reforming. Art born from war. Comedy born from tragedy. We fail constantly, the transmission said. We argue. We contradict ourselves. We invent problems and then invent solutions to the problems we invented. In Houston, Elena felt tears prick her eyes. You can't model us because we can't fully model ourselves. On the flagship, Imperial processors strained to categorize the accompanying footage. It did not align with conquest metrics. It aligned with adaptation. The human message concluded, you think power is control. We think survival is flexibility. You see chaos as weakness. We turned it into a feature. A final line appeared. If you conquer us, you inherit us. That sentence rippled through the Empire's decision matrices like a destabilizing waveform. Invasion would not merely add territory. It would expose Imperial systems to sustained unpredictability. Hierarchy would confront satire. Doctrine would confront improvisation. Certainty would confront laughter. For the first time in their expansion history, the Empire faced a cost not measured in energy or casualties, a mimetic cost, cultural corrosion, the possibility that rigidity, once their greatest strength, was now a liability. Another message formed from a flagship, slower than the first, less certain. You are irrational. On Earth, millions smiled. The reply came almost instantly. Exactly. Silence followed. Not tense. Not terrified. Curious. The 9 ships shifted formation. Not into attack vectors. Not into parade symmetry. They rotated slightly off alignment. Fractions of degrees breaking the perfect geometry they had maintained since arrival. A small imperfection. Barely visible. But real. Imperial engines ignited. Not with aggressive flare, but with controlled retreat. One by one, the vessels ascended from orbit, moving beyond lunar distance, then beyond the asteroid belt. No dramatic final threat. No promise of return. Just departure. In Geneva, the room remained silent long after sensors confirmed the fleet's vector pointed outward, away from sun. Admiral Ortega exhaled slowly in Madrid. Elena leaned back in her chair and began laughing. Not loudly, not hysterically, but with exhausted relief. Across Earth, celebrations erupted, not triumphal, but incredulous. They hadn't won. They hadn't overpowered. They had confused a galactic empire into reconsideration. Years later, historians would analyze the encounter. Some would argue the empire withdrew to reassess strategic doctrine. Some would claim humanity represented too high a long-term instability risk. Some would insist the empire simply decided Earth wasn't worth the effort. But those who had watched the sky darken with impossible ships knew something deeper had happened. The empire arrived expecting fear. They encountered satire. They deployed inevitability. They met improvisation. And when confronted with a species that answered annihilation with punchlines, the empire discovered something more destabilizing than rebellion. It discovered laughter. And it left